The apartment was quiet, too quiet for my liking. The hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the wall clock were the only sounds filling the space. I sank into the worn-out couch in the living room, letting the weight of my day press down on me. My name is Alex, and to anyone passing by, I was just another 26-year-old struggling to make ends meet. But behind the mundane exterior, there was a side of me that few knew, a side that made my heart race and my mind tangle with a mix of guilt, shame, and excitement. I had always been fascinated by the idea of transformation. Not the kind you read about in superhero comics, but the subtler, more intimate kind, becoming someone else entirely for just a little while. Sometimes it was just clothes, sometimes it was makeup, sometimes it was the way I moved, spoke, and carried myself. For years, it had been a secret passion, hidden from the world, carefully tucked away behind locked doors and whispered thoughts. Life, however, had a cruel habit of forcing decisions. I had been struggling with rent for months. The economy wasn't kind, and my small freelance design gig barely covered food, let alone the apartment I had moved into with Isabella, my girlfriend. She was stunning, brilliant, and entirely unaware of this secret part of me. Most nights, I watched her drift off to sleep and wondered if she'd ever noticed the subtle changes in my behavior, the softer touches of my hands, the careful attention to grooming, the way my voice sometimes wavered when I was alone. Then came the offer that changed everything. It was a rainy Thursday evening when Isabella returned from work early. I had just settled into my usual routine, which involved sneaking a peek at a box of dresses I had impulsively bought months ago and never dared to wear. I heard her keys jingle, and panic flared in my chest. The box had to be hidden. Fast. But before I could even think of a place to shove it, she was already inside, smiling warmly. "Alex, you won't believe this," she said, holding up a paper. I blinked. She had a way of being cheerful that could disarm anyone, and for a second, my nerves quieted. "It's the landlord," she continued. "He's offering free rent for 6 months, if one of us lives here full-time. He wants someone reliable, obviously. And he suggested something unusual." Her cheeks flushed slightly. "He said he'd consider it if one of us presented themselves in a more, feminine way." The words hit me like a hammer. My heart raced. My palms went clammy. Was this some kind of joke? But the way Isabella avoided my eyes, the faint trembling in her voice, it wasn't a joke. I wanted to protest, to tell her it was insane, impossible. But a part of me, my hidden longing part, ignited at the thought. The idea of finally being able to explore the secret, fully, with a kind of legitimacy I'd never known, it was terrifying. And exhilarating. Isabella didn't know the full extent of my secret, but I sensed that in that moment, our lives were about to change. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my voice. "So, you're saying I could live like a girl and get free rent?" Her eyebrows rose. "Well, yeah, that's the catch. But you'd have to really commit. Clothes, makeup, maybe even a new name. Something believable." The thought of the transformation sent shivers down my spine. I imagined the silky dresses, the soft stockings, the way makeup could alter every angle of my face. And then the fear crept in. What if Isabella found out? What if she rejected me? What if society judged me? The stakes were enormous, and yet, the temptation was irresistible. I spent the next hour pacing the apartment, running through the possibilities. The living room, dimly lit by a single lamp, became a stage in my mind. I imagined myself in the mirror, practicing the subtle tilt of my head, the curve of my lips, the delicate movement of my hands. I could almost feel the transformation, the new identity pressing against my skin like a second heartbeat. But it wasn't just the physical change that excited me. It was the psychological shift, the thrill of being someone else entirely, someone free from the pressures and expectations of Alex the designer, Alex the boyfriend, Alex the roommate. For the first time, I glimpsed a version of myself that could exist openly in a way I had only dreamed of in secrecy. As the rain pattered against the windows, I realized the decision wasn't just about free rent. It was about me, finally stepping into a role I had longed for, yet feared. And as I looked over at Isabella, who was now quietly watching me, I knew that my life was about to take a turn I couldn't undo. The box of dresses in the corner seemed to beckon, and a thrill of anticipation coursed through me. What would it feel like to wear them? To glide through the apartment, to hear the subtle click of heels against the floor, to see my reflection and not just recognize myself, but see someone entirely new? I sat down, gripping the couch as my mind raced. This wasn't just a challenge. It was a door, one I could step through or slam shut forever. And somewhere deep down, I knew I was already halfway across the threshold. The first days after Isabella's revelation were a whirlwind. I kept replaying her words over and over in my head. If one of us presented themselves in a more feminine way, the offer of free rent had transformed from a simple proposal into a gateway, one that could unlock a hidden part of myself I had spent years hiding. I started small. Alone in the apartment, I experimented. A simple skirt, a loose blouse, and a touch of eyeliner. The mirror became my confidant. I studied my reflection with painstaking attention. Each stroke of makeup, each adjustment of clothing, revealed a side of me that had been waiting patiently in the shadows. The first time I put on a wig, the feeling was electric. I traced the strands, brushed them gently, and tilted my head to see how my features softened, reshaping into something new. But it wasn't simple bliss. Every glance in the mirror brought a pang of shame. Was this wrong? Should I feel this way? The thrill of transformation was laced with fear. I worried about being caught, by Isabella, by friends, by neighbors. And yet, the longer I dressed, the more I felt alive. I began to notice small, intimate changes in my behavior. I adjusted the way I walked, letting my hips sway just slightly. I softened my voice, careful not to exaggerate, but enough that even a casual listener might notice a subtle change. Touching my own skin, feeling the smooth fabric of stockings against my legs, the silky caress of a dress, ignited sensations that were simultaneously thrilling and terrifying. Every sound in the apartment became a potential threat. The hum of the refrigerator, the creak of floorboards, the occasional cough from a neighbor. Each startled me. I was hyper-aware, cautious. The knowledge that Isabella could return at any moment made even the simplest acts, putting on makeup, adjusting a wig, an adrenaline rush. One evening, I decided to test my abilities fully. I wore a fitted dress, high heels, and a wig that cascaded down my shoulders. I applied makeup with painstaking care, contouring and highlighting until my face seemed to belong to someone else entirely. The transformation wasn't just external. It felt as if a new persona was slowly taking shape inside me. Standing before the mirror, I experimented with expressions, smiling, tilting my head, the subtle flutter of lashes. I had to remind myself, this was a role I was stepping into, one that could grant me freedom in exchange for a risk I could barely comprehend. The reflection staring back at me was both exhilarating and terrifying. It was during these moments alone that I started to hear a whisper of my inner voice, the part of me that had longed for acceptance and understanding. "Who are you really?" it asked. And I couldn't answer. Not fully. Not yet. The transformation wasn't limited to clothes or makeup. I experimented with posture, the gentle arch of my back, the tilt of my shoulders, the way my hands rested delicately when I reached for objects. I practiced speaking softly, letting my words carry a subtle, musical lilt that felt foreign yet natural. I became increasingly aware of the duality within me, the Alex who existed in the daylight and the woman who emerged in solitude. With every day that passed, the stakes rose. I had to keep up appearances with Isabella, who remained oblivious, while simultaneously exploring this new identity. Even the mundane tasks, cooking, cleaning, answering the phone, took on a heightened sense of tension. I was constantly alert, calculating. Would she notice a smudge of lipstick I forgot to wipe? A crease in my skirt? The way I adjusted my hair? Then came the first test. Isabella had mentioned a friend, Clara, who might visit unexpectedly. The thought of someone discovering me in this state made my heart pound. I practiced every movement, rehearsed excuses, and imagined countless scenarios of being discovered. The thrill of the possibility, mixed with fear, made my pulse race. Despite the tension, I found myself becoming bolder. I experimented with different styles: tight dresses, flowing skirts, delicate jewelry, elegant heels. Each outfit became a study in contrasts: excitement and vulnerability, pleasure and shame. When I stood in front of the mirror, fully dressed, I almost forgot the world outside. It was a private, intoxicating stage where I could be completely, unapologetically me. Yet, the suspense was never far. One rainy evening, I heard footsteps approaching the apartment. My heart leaped. I had been practicing in heels, my dress perfectly fitted, my makeup flawless. I froze, hoping the sound wasn't Isabella. But it was her, and she came in early. My stomach twisted. I retreated into the bedroom, quickly removing the wig, adjusting my clothes, trying to appear normal. Isabella called out, laughing, unaware of my hidden identity just feet away. The adrenaline surged, and my pulse drummed in my ears. I realized, in that moment, that this game was no longer just fantasy. It was a delicate balance of risk and reward, a suspenseful dance that could unravel at any second. Over the next weeks, I became meticulous. Every detail mattered. Matching stockings to shoes, practicing my walk in heels, perfecting subtle makeup techniques, adjusting my hairline, learning the art of feminine gestures. The transformation became a slow, careful process, like sculpting a new identity from raw emotion and desire. And yet, I couldn't ignore the psychological changes. The more I dressed and acted as a woman, the more I questioned my own identity. Who was Alex? Who was the girl in the mirror? Was this merely an experiment for free rent? Or had I found a side of myself that had always existed, waiting to be acknowledged? The lines blurred, the suspense building with each passing day. It was during one late night, alone in the apartment, that I experienced a moment of pure revelation. Standing fully dressed, heels clicking softly against the wooden floor, I looked in the mirror and felt a surge of emotion. Pride, fear, desire, all mingled into something powerful. I realized that this wasn't just about free rent or even secrecy. It was about freedom, exploration, and the dangerous thrill of living on the edge of my own identity. And that thrill came with consequences. Every door knock, every unexpected text from Isabella, every shadow in the hallway became a potential catastrophe. I was living in a suspended state of tension, a constant balancing act between who I was and who I wanted to be. The slow feminization, the careful cultivation of my secret, became both a source of liberation and a trap. By the time the week ended, the apartment no longer felt like a simple home. It was a stage, a laboratory, a crucible where my dual identity was forged. And I knew, deep in my heart, that the stakes were only going to rise. One wrong move could expose everything, but the allure of stepping fully into this new self was impossible to resist. The apartment felt smaller now, tighter. Every sound reverberated, every shadow seemed to watch me. I had been living in this delicate balance for weeks, my dual life teetering on a knife edge. Every day, the thrill of cross-dressing grew stronger, but so did the fear of discovery. It started with an unexpected knock at the door. My heart leapt, pulse pounding like a drum in my ears. I wasn't expecting anyone. Isabella had gone to work. The building was quiet. But the knock came again, insistent, closer, echoing in the hallway. I peeked through the peephole and froze. It was Clara, Isabella's friend. Panic surged through me. Clara was sharp, observant, the kind of person who noticed the smallest details. And right now I was wearing a flowing dress, stockings, heels, and a wig. My makeup was perfect, but so was my nervousness. I debated ignoring the knock, pretending I wasn't home. But Clara was persistent. Each tap against the door felt like a drumbeat counting down to disaster. I scrambled, pulling at my wig, trying to straighten my skirt, my heels clicking against the floor. My reflection in the mirror caught my eye, half Alex, half the woman I had been becoming. I opened the door, just a crack. "Hey, Clara," I said, my voice soft, careful. Come in." She stepped inside, smiling. I thought I'd surprise Isabella. She's not here, right? My stomach twisted. I had seconds to decide, reveal my secret or maintain the facade. I chose the latter. Yeah, she stepped out for a bit, I replied, adjusting my posture, letting my hips sway naturally. Do you want to wait? Clara's eyes flicked over me, and I could feel the scrutiny like a physical weight. Every gesture, every tilt of my head, every flutter of my lashes was under inspection. I tried to remain composed, but my mind raced. The conversation began casually. Clara asked about Isabella's work, about my own routine, and about small, innocuous things. But with each passing minute, the tension grew unbearable. One wrong comment, one slip of my voice, and everything could unravel. Then the moment of truth arrived. Clara moved closer to inspect a new painting I had hung, her back to me. I was alone in the kitchen, adjusting the hem of my dress, when my heel caught on the edge of the rug. I stumbled, almost falling, my hands grasping for support. Clara turned, alarmed. Are you okay? I laughed nervously, feeling the blush creep up my neck. Yeah, just clumsy. It was a close call, but I managed to maintain my composure. I realized, with a shiver of exhilaration, that the danger, the suspense, was intoxicating. The fear of being caught made every detail sharper, every sensation more vivid. After Clara left, I sank into the living room, trembling. The adrenaline surged, leaving my hands shaky and my heart racing. I realized that this wasn't just about appearance anymore. I was becoming someone else, someone bold, confident, and yet incredibly vulnerable. The next day, Isabella returned unexpectedly early from work. I had just put on a new outfit, a tight, elegant dress that hugged every curve, high heels that clicked with authority, and a wig styled in soft waves. My makeup was flawless. I heard her keys jingling in the hallway, and my breath caught. I had only seconds to react. I ducked behind the sofa, trying to remove the wig, but it was tangled, stubborn. My fingers fumbled, and I could hear Isabella entering the apartment. Alex, she called. You home? I froze, heart hammering. The wig slipped partially off my head, revealing a shock of my natural hair. Isabella's eyes widened, and for a moment, everything stopped, the air thick with tension. I stepped out slowly, trying to act natural, adjusting the wig as if it were nothing. Yeah, just relaxing, I said, voice trembling slightly. She studied me, head tilted, expression unreadable. You look different. The words were both terrifying and thrilling. My secret was teetering on the edge of exposure. I could feel my entire identity, the carefully constructed persona, hanging in the balance. Over the next hours, I faced a series of escalating obstacles. Phone calls from neighbors, unexpected visits from delivery people, and small domestic mishaps, a spilled drink, a broken vase, tested my ability to maintain composure. Every moment was a tightrope walk between exposure and secrecy. Then came the symbolic moment. I had placed a small mirror on the coffee table to adjust my makeup, and it reflected both my faces, Alex and the woman I had become. The sight was overwhelming. I reached for the mirror, hesitated, and then let it fall. The glass shattered, scattering fragments across the floor. The sound echoed like a warning. I sank to my knees, picking up the shards carefully. In that moment, I realized that the transformation was no longer just external. I had crossed a line. There was no going back to being just Alex. The woman in the mirror had claimed a part of me that could never be denied. Even as the adrenaline faded, the suspense didn't. I knew Isabella's curiosity would only grow. I knew that any misstep could reveal my secret completely. But more than fear, I felt a surge of empowerment. The danger, the thrill, the duality. It was intoxicating. By nightfall, the apartment was quiet again, but I couldn't relax. I sat on the couch, legs crossed, heels clicking softly against the floor, reflecting on the day's events. The suspense, the risk, the thrill of discovery. It was all part of a game that had no clear rules and no guarantees. And yet, I couldn't resist it. The night ended with one final moment of tension, a notification on my phone. A message from Isabella. "We need to talk about your new look." I froze. The suspense reached its peak. Every heartbeat was deafening. Would she accept me? Reject me? Expose me? The unknown stretched ahead, terrifying and thrilling all at once.